The wind moved like a whisper of ghosts across the endless white, curling through the canyons and brushing the skin of the land until even the rocks seemed to shiver. Snow fell in patient silence, each flake landing like a memory too fragile to last. Through that silver storm trudged a woman and two small children, shapes of endurance against the pale horizon. Her name was Evelyn May Carter, though no one had spoken it kindly in months. Her husband's grave lay behind her, somewhere beneath a cross of frozen pine, and her future stretched ahead like the snow itself, blank, cold, and unforgiving. Her boots, once her husband's, were split at the toes. She'd stuffed them with torn pages from a Bible found in an abandoned church, and each step whispered scripture through the drifts. The younger child, Lucy, was silent now, half asleep in her mother's arms. The boy, Owen, coughed with the wet rattle of hunger. Evelyn pressed his face to her coat and whispered, "Just a little farther, my love. There's a town ahead. Maybe they'll have bread." But she didn't believe it. By the time they reached Frostbite Creek, the world had turned to dusk. Smoke rose from chimneys, promising warmth she could not touch. Evelyn's eyes followed the faint glow of windows, her stomach tightening with the sharp ache of shame. She could already feel their stares, the invisible walls of pity and judgment that small towns built faster than fences. She pushed open the door to the general store. A bell chimed, cheerful and cruel. Mrs. Delaney stood behind the counter, her gray hair tucked under a wool scarf, her lips drawn thin as winter bark. The warmth hit Evelyn like a wound reopening. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't move. "Well now," Mrs. Delaney said, not unkindly but not kindly either. "Didn't think I'd be seeing you again, Mrs. Carter." Evelyn's voice cracked. "I was hoping maybe if there's work to be done or if you have anything near to spoiling. My children haven't eaten since yesterday." Silence stretched. A man near the shelves cleared his throat, eyes averted. Someone muttered, "That's the widow Carter. Her husband died owing half this town." Mrs. Delaney sighed, as if weariness itself were a virtue. "I'm sorry, truly. But folks are short this winter. Can't be handing things out. Not after what happened." Evelyn nodded slowly, as though she'd expected the words all along. She turned to leave, her cheeks burning not from cold but from the invisible fire of humiliation. Lucy began to cry softly, her tears freezing before they reached her chin. Owen tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking in a whisper, "Mama, are we bad?" Evelyn didn't answer. Outside the snow was heavier. The light was dying. She walked until her legs betrayed her, until she sank to her knees beside the hitching post outside the saloon. The children huddled against her skirts. She pressed her lips to their hair and murmured, "I'm sorry, my darlings. I can't." Her voice broke under the weight of it. The snow fell harder, erasing their outlines. A horse approached, slow and sure-footed. She didn't look up until the boots stopped beside her and a shadow blocked the wind. A man's voice, deep and steady, cut through the storm. "Ma'am, you all right?" She raised her head. The man was tall, broad-shouldered beneath a dark duster dusted with snow. His hat shadowed most of his face, but his eyes, gray as riverstone, studied her without judgment. She tried to speak, but the words tangled. Finally she whispered, "Sir, please, take my children. They'll die if I keep them." He didn't answer at first. The wind filled the pause between them, cold and unkind. Then he dismounted, the leather of his gloves creaking as he knelt beside her. "Name's Colt Remington," he said quietly. "Ain't in the habit of taking what ain't mine, ma'am. But I reckon I won't be leaving anyone out here to freeze neither." He lifted Lucy first, wrapping her in his coat, then helped Owen to his feet. When he reached for Evelyn's hand, she hesitated only a second before letting him pull her up. His grip was warm, steady, the first human kindness she'd felt in months. They rode together through the storm. Evelyn clutched her children close as Colt guided his horse along the narrow trail leading north. The snow blurred everything except the sound of the horse's breath and the steady rhythm of Colt's voice as he told the animal to hold strong. Just a little farther, when they reached the ranch, Evelyn thought she'd stepped into a dream. The house was large but lonely. Dark windows, a porch buried under snow. The barn roof sagged under white weight, the fences half swallowed by drifts. Colt carried Lucy inside without a word, setting her gently by the fire before lighting it. The flames caught slow, throwing amber light across the room. Dust rose like ghosts awakened. Evelyn stood near the door, unsure. Her clothes steamed from the snow. Colt handed her a blanket without looking at her. "Sit. Warm 'em up." The children huddled by the fire, eyes wide at the sudden light and heat. Owen reached toward the flames, whispering, "It's real warm, Mama." Evelyn nodded, unable to speak around the knot in her throat. Colt busied himself at the stove, pouring what little coffee he had into a tin mug. He handed it to her and sat across the room, elbows on his knees. Ain't got much, but you're welcome to stay till the storm eases, she managed. You're kind, Mr. Remington. He shook his head. Ain't kind. Just decent. Storm like this don't forgive fools or cowards. That night, Evelyn lay awake on the floor near the hearth, her children asleep beside her. She listened to the wind clawing at the walls and thought about how quiet the ranch was. No laughter, no footsteps but his. It was the silence of someone who'd made peace with loneliness. In the morning, she found him already outside, chopping wood. Frost clung to his beard. Each swing of the axe was clean, deliberate, as if the motion itself kept him tethered to life. When he saw her, he nodded once, wordless. She watched him work until she noticed the small cross nailed to the barn wall. Its wood, weathered and splitting. A woman's bonnet hung beside it. She said nothing, but something in her heart understood him in that moment more than any conversation could have offered. Days passed. The storm eased, though the cold lingered. Evelyn swept floors, patched curtains, boiled what little they had left for stew. Colt mended fences and hauled feed to the horses. Their words were few, but the air between them filled with small mercies. A cup left warm on the table. A blanket folded without being asked. When Evelyn stitched the torn lining of Colt's coat, he caught her wrist gently. Don't have to. I want to, she said. He nodded once, eyes unreadable. Then thank you. At night the fire painted their faces in shades of gold and sorrow. Lucy and Owen would drift to sleep beside the hearth, and Evelyn would sit quietly, hands folded, staring into the flames as if they could tell her what came next. Sometimes she'd catch Colt watching her, never with hunger or pity, but something softer, older, like recognition. In town, whispers began. People said Colt Remington had taken in the Carter widow. Some said it was charity. Others called it sin. Evelyn heard it when Colt went to fetch supplies. He came back silent, his jaw tight. They're talking, she said softly one night. He shrugged. Let 'em. Folks gotta talk about something or they'll remember their own misfortunes. I don't want to cause trouble for you. He looked at her for a long time, then said, Ain't trouble if it keeps good people alive. His words stayed with her through the long evenings. For the first time in years, she began to hum lullabies again. The sound filled the cabin, and sometimes, when she thought he couldn't hear, Colt would pause outside the door, listening. One evening, Evelyn rose to find him standing by the stable, speaking softly to his horse. She stopped at the doorway, hidden in shadow. Didn't reckon I'd care again, old boy, he murmured, patting the horse's neck. Didn't reckon I'd let anyone stay. Evelyn felt the words settle deep inside her chest. She stepped back into the house, tears stinging her eyes. That night, she sat beside the fire long after the children had fallen asleep. Outside, the snow had stopped. The wind was still. For the first time since her husband's death, she let herself breathe without guilt, without the heaviness of survival pressing against her ribs. She looked around the small cabin, the boots drying by the fire, the kettle's soft hum, the slow, steady rise and fall of her children's breathing, and felt something fragile take root inside her. Not happiness, not yet, but something close enough to reach for. In the corner, the door creaked softly. Colt stood there leaning against the frame, watching the fire. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. For a long while, they just listened, to the crackle of the flames, to the quiet song of the wind finding its way through the hills. Then he turned, tipped his hat, and said, Night, Mrs. Carter. Good night, Mr. Remington. When he was gone, she let the smallest smile touch her lips. Outside, the winter moon rose over the Remington ranch, silver and serene, glinting on the snow like forgiveness itself. And somewhere deep within that frozen world, two hearts began to thaw. The cold that wrapped Frostbite Creek in its frozen grasp was not just the wind or the snow. It was the sharp edge of eyes watching, whispering, judging. Rumors slid through the town like ice beneath a worn boot, slick and relentless. Colt Remington's quiet generosity was a beacon that stirred envy and suspicion among the wary folk who clung to their small comforts and older grudges. Sheriff Dugan, once a friend of Evelyn's late husband, now bore the weight of a jealousy that thickened the air between them all. He came to Colt one afternoon, the snow crunching beneath his boots, his voice low but firm. Colt, you're walking a dangerous line. Folks don't take kindly to charity that smells like sin. You ought to think twice before letting that woman and her kids stay on your land. The sheriff's eyes flickered with something beyond warning, a desire to reclaim what he'd lost. Colt's gaze met his with unyielding calm. I'm not looking to start trouble, Dugan. Just keeping folks alive until spring. No more words passed between them, but the cold in the sheriff's stare lingered longer than the snow in the shadows. Evelyn heard the town's whispers like distant thunder, and with every harsh word, her cheeks burned anew. Yet in the quiet moments beside Colt's fire, the warmth seeped deeper than her skin. She wanted to protect him now, to shelter the man, who had become their steadfast guardian, even as the frostbitten world threatened to close around them. Then the storm returned, fiercer than before. The sky darkened beneath swollen clouds, and the wind howled like a beast desperate for escape. Snow fell in thick curtains, swallowing the land whole. The barn roof groaned under the weight of white, and the fences disappeared beneath the piling drifts. Inside the house, the fire sputtered low, its amber glow fighting against the growing chill. Colt knew the horses wouldn't survive if they were left to the storm's mercy. His hands, rough and steady, pulled on his coat and hat. Evelyn's voice caught in the crackling air. "You don't have to go out there. You've done enough for us." Her eyes searched his, pleading. "Please, Colt." He shook his head slowly. "A man's got to stand for what's his, Evelyn. Ain't no other way." The storm swallowed his words as he stepped into the white fury. Hours stretched like frozen hours in the house. Lucy and Owen clung to Evelyn, their tiny hands trembling as they whispered prayers to the flickering fire. Each creak of the door, each snap of a twig outside, sent a shiver down her spine. The house felt impossibly large and empty without Colt's steady presence. When night fell deepest, Evelyn made a decision that surprised even herself. She wrapped Colt's coat tightly around her and knelt by the door, steeling her breath against the storm's fury. "I'm going after him," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her children protested softly, but she kissed their foreheads, promising to return. The wind lashed her face, and the snow blinded her eyes as she pushed into the white wilderness. Each step was agony, but the thought of Colt, alone, trapped, kept her moving. Her fingers burned with cold, her breath ragged, but she would not stop. Finally, through the veil of snow, she saw the broken frame of the barn, half collapsed under the relentless storm. A shadow moved beneath the fallen beams. She dropped to her knees, heart hammering. Colt's face was pale beneath the smudges of dirt and frost, pain etched into every line. His arm was pinned beneath a heavy beam. "Colt!" Her voice cracked as she gripped the wood and pulled with all her might. The beam shifted, then fell aside. She reached for his hand, cold and trembling. "Hold on. I've got you." Together, they struggled through the drifts, every movement a battle against the cold and exhaustion. She carried him back to the house, tears freezing on her cheeks, whispering promises that neither could hear but both believed. Inside, she tended to his wounds with trembling hands, cleaning the cuts, binding the bruises. Colt's eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with something that felt like gratitude, and something deeper, unspoken. The fire's warmth wrapped around them, a fragile shield against the world outside. Morning broke with pale light, spilling over the pristine snow. Colt awoke to find Evelyn asleep beside the hearth, her breath slow and steady, the children nestled near her. He reached out gently, placing his hat on her head as if it were a crown. She stirred, eyes fluttering open to meet his gaze, quiet and full of something new. Outside, the town was silent beneath the weight of the storm's passing. The people of Frostbite Creek awoke to find the Remington Ranch still standing, solid and defiant amidst the ruins of lesser homes. Word spread quickly, and the whispers softened, replaced by a reluctant respect. One by one, neighbors came with empty hands and bowed heads, asking for help without shame. Colt and Evelyn met them with quiet grace, offering what little they had without expectation. Their strength became a shelter for the broken, a beacon of hope in a landscape carved from hardship. And in that shared struggle, something tender took root between Colt and Evelyn. Not loud declarations, but small gestures that spoke louder than words. A hand lingered a moment longer, a smile caught in the corner of tired eyes, a warm meal left waiting on the table. The slow burn of connection, born not of passion, but of survival and shared humanity. The winter's harsh grip began to loosen, the days growing longer and the nights less fierce. Yet the memory of that frozen time lingered in their hearts, a reminder that even in the coldest storms, The smallest acts of kindness could ignite a fire strong enough to last. I reckon, if you ever find yourself lost in the snow, remember this. Love ain't always the roar of a wildfire. Sometimes, it's the steady flame kept alive by hands that refuse to let go, no matter how fierce the wind. And if you listen close, you might just hear it crackling beneath the quiet, the promise that no one has to face the dark alone. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If these Wild West tales warm your soul like a good fire on a cold night, don't forget to subscribe and keep the stories coming. There's plenty more out there, waiting for you beyond the horizon.